Hi everybody, today I would like to do a very simple introductory tutorial on how to get started with Bootstrap. To kind of just recap what Bootstrap is for. So when we get to code something like this, for instance, then we will have a better understanding of what each of these elements are. But as an introductory comment to when we work in Photoshop, for instance, for laying out, just remember that you have to work with a 12-column grid so that you have kind of an understanding of how big your objects are going to be. Number one, and how you lay it out is super important. Okay, so it makes a lot of sense to actually just lay it out the way that you are going to code it. So there's a handshake, which is your top area, and in the handshake you will have your nav bar, and you'll have some elements, the image in there. You have section 1, which is in this case going to be specials. There is range. These are all cards which we're going to deal with. This could be a slider or a carousel. Then we have testimonials, which is something quite simple, which can also actually be a card. Then we got our shop, which we're going to use Jumbotron for. And then we have our footer, which we're going to style a little bit differently. So this is what we're going to eventually going to code. But to start off with, let's just look at very basic Bootstrap elements. Okay. I also would like to just show a few URLs to you, because these are things that I like to keep open when I am actually inside of the coding process. The one is htmlcheatsheet.com, really handy. There's a lot of things here that you can use. Things that we are going to use, for instance, is look at some head tags that we need, but it's really important to just kind of gaze the HTML page structure. It's important that you understand the HTML5 page structure and not just copy and paste from Bootstrap without really paying attention to why you are doing certain things. Why are you using sections? Why are you using a footer? If you need to do an aside, why are you using it? The other website that I really like is cssreference.io. And this is very helpful if you want to use a specific CSS, but you're not 100% sure what you are going to do with it, or what you need to do with it to actually make your object appear. For instance, if you use background position, what does it actually do if you use center? So I never code without having CSS reference IO open, because it actually helps me. I'm not 100% sure about my border radius, so I'm not sure what the elements are that I need to use for border radius. So that's why I keep a CSS reference IO open. A very useful, especially for beginners, a very useful website to go to is htmldog.com, one of my favorites as well. If you go and click on techniques, it will actually show you quite a lot of very useful techniques that you might not want to use every day, but they are suitably useful. So for instance, if you want to create rollovers, how does that look? If you want to create CSS tabs, what does it look like? Or CSS drop-downs. A very good, helpful starter website for learning CSS is Interneting is Hard, one of my absolute favorites. I'm actually just going to rebookmark it again under my 2020 bookmarks. Things like learnshayo.com for learning HTML, very useful. A whole lot of useful lessons that you can go through is how do we actually create our first page, getting to know CSS, how do we actually set backgrounds and gradients. So again, if you're not 100% sure about anything that I'm going to do, these are very useful websites to just kind of bookmark to yourself, so that you have them for future reference. Join Code Academy if you need practice. It's free and it's very helpful. One of my favorite websites that I use is MayerWeb's Reset CSS. And the reason why I use this is because it helps me to reset browser quirks. For instance, I will always start with With some of the resets, again, you can actually just copy and paste this and use this as a separate CSS, but you can also just copy and paste this into your CSS. One of the elements that I use is the asterisk. Now, I just use the asterisk as is, but it's important that you actually pay attention to creating a style for the asterisk, which is all elements, but you can list them individually. Margin 0, padding 0, border 0 is really important. It just takes some extra margin and padding that the browser put on an element away. Another very useful website to actually use is Bootstrapius, and this one will actually help you to just find your way around some really cool templates. And maybe it sometimes helps us to look at these templates and to kind of like figure out a way, how do they do this actually? You know, what was that component? Did they use it as a slider? Did they use a jumbotron? So it kind of helps us to just make our life a little bit easier when it comes to understanding Bootstrap. And then again, obviously freecodecamp.org. This is a very, very helpful tool, helpful website to get you started with really understanding HTML and understanding CSS. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do a very, very simple site with a nav bar, a jumbotron. So we're going to look at some documentation, jumbotron, slides, and some cards. And the reason why I'm going to use cards is because when I look at my Photoshop, these are actual cards. This is a slider, and this could be a jumbotron. So when you design something as well, and you want to use Bootstrap, design also according to the Bootstrap components, and you will just make your life a lot easier. Okay. So I'm going to go into Atom today. Now, what I've done in Atom is I've created a folder already in Atom, and in my folder there is the folder corresponds to the folder that I have. Okay. Remember, very important, guys, the way that you set up your root folder is extremely important. Forget about the underscore design, that's just me. These three folders, CSS, IMG, JS, super important. They are folders inside the root folder of your site. And it is non-negotiable that they are there. CSS contains all the CSS of the Bootstrap plus your own. Styles, styles1, my styles, whatever you're going to call it. I've called it styles.css. You're going to copy from your original Bootstrap into this. So you're going to download Bootstrap and then you're going to copy it. Keep that Bootstrap original folder as is. All right, just copy over. Same with JS. All the JS that exists in the original Bootstrap, you're going to copy into this folder. And then obviously we have an image folder that is going to have all our images. I've just made some test cards, test slides that we're going to use a little bit later. But again, the root folder is super important. And then please, 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 index is by itself. It doesn't live in a folder. It is by itself in your root folder. So you have a root folder for your site. There's 3 folders in that, but index is by itself in the root folder. All right, so that is what I see when I go to my project folder inside of Atom. All right, so I'm going to go down here at the bottom, or sorry, let me first start and make a new file. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to change it from plain text to HTML. So the nice thing about it, if you do that and you save it now, I'm just going to make it index 01. If you save it, then it is in HTML. And if I now type in HTML and press tab, I will get a very simple layout or boilerplate for HTML. I'm not necessarily going to use that because I'm going to use the boilerplate structure of Bootstrap. So just to show you what we are going to do, I'm going to open that index file so that you have an idea of what we are going to do. All right, so we're going to build a navigation. We're going to have some slides, then we're going to have a jumbotron, and then we're going to have some cards. So very simple, that's what we're going to do, just so that you understand how do we bring in a component from Bootstrap into our actual website. Okay, so just going to save this .html. All right. Then we're going to go back to Bootstrap and we're going to go into our documentation. Let's go home. Let's get documentation. And in documentation, I am now going to click on my starter template. And this is the template that you do want to start off with. Okay, this is the template that is going to hold components or hold the elements that you do need. Okay, so I'm just going to say copy. And then here I am going to paste. Now there's some things that we don't need. We don't actually need all this stuff in front of CSS because our CSS lives inside of our CSS folder. We're not going to link to the web for our CSS. And the same with our JavaScript. So our JavaScript lives in our own JavaScript. So we can take this front part out. We're not linking to an outside component or outside URL. We're just linking it here. So now we can save. Also, guys, we're actually, if you're going to change the Bootstrap, just use bootstrap.css and not the minified version. The minified version is just one long line of text. What is important about the boilerplate that you will get is that it has your viewport meta tag in there, and that's super important. You need to have that. Okay, our title is just going to not be Hello World, but Hello Bootstrap. Just remember that the title is super important for SEO. So make sure that your title actually is very indicative of what the site is about. I'm also going to take out the H1 because I'm not going to start with an H1. All right, so I'm just going to save this. Now we're going to go back into our HTML cheat sheet because there's a few others that we need. We want a description and we want a keyword meta tag. So I'm going to copy that. You'll find this in the head tag option. And I'm going to bring that across and add that to my head tags. All right, I'm going to save. I also want a link to my own style sheet. So I'm going to do link rel style sheet. And that href is obviously going to be, again, my CSS folder / styles dot CSS. Okay. The other link that I want is link rel, and I'm just going to, and that href is going to be my favicon, and that is img / favicon.ico. All right. This is, I think it's type, but I'm just going to leave that for now. And think the rel is shortcut icon. Okay, we'll double check that a little bit later. Okay, so next is what I'm going to do is I'm going to start building my page. Now for me, Bootstrap always starts with a container. A container holds my content. So I'm going to start with a div container. And just remember, div class, just remember that there are two types of containers inside of Bootstrap. So the first is container, all right, and then there's a container fluid, and we're going to talk about the difference in a bit. All right, so I'm going to just close my div here. Again, I'm going to give myself some space here. And I'm also just going to say this is just in front of it. This is, I'm going to copy it out. Yeah? Oh, sorry, make a comment. Start of, let's call it start of home or start of handshake section. Okay. All right. And then this is going to be, let's say, end of home. It's a start of home section, sorry. Okay, all right. Now we're going to go back to Bootstrap and we are going to bring in our first, which is what do we start a page with? What do we start a page with? Well, normally we start a page with nav or navbar. Okay, so what is the difference really between, or let me go back. What's the difference between nav and navbar? So for me, navbar is a very simple list. Okay, navbar holds the toggler. Navbar holds your automatic little hamburger that you kind of need for your responsiveness. So, but again, if you need any other type of navigation inside of your page, then you can go and use a nav. But for me, I use a nav bar when I want to start my page. So that is kind of why I think that's for me the one that that I'd like to use. Okay. Nav you can use, for instance, like any other navigation, sub-navigation, footer navigation, things like that. But a nav bar is actually the one at the top. So if I click on nav bar, remember I'm in components. If I click on nav bar, I have a lot of options. All right. Please make sure that you actually go through them so that you understand all the contents that you can get into a nav bar. So we have one that is got everything in here. All right, it's got a toggle in it, it's got a search in it. It is very, very comprehensive. Always what you got to look out for is whether it has a toggler in there. But if you just drop down, you'll see that they start with very basic. You have a navbar brand, which is basically just an element that you can add your logo into, etc., etc. Okay. For instance, if we look at something like a very simple brand, we have that back bar. The back bar is navbar light because it's the lightest version, and background light. Okay, and then we have an image, all right, and also an actual A-link. So if you want to put a logo in there, remember that you've got to have an IMG in there as well. Otherwise, obviously, it doesn't work. And then, as I said, then you have more and more links. Some are current, which means they are now selected, and some are disabled, which means they are light. So if I go right at the top, this is the one that I am going to use. Just remember that I don't necessarily have an image in there under my first home. So I need to actually put an image in there if I want to use an image in there later. But we are going to do that. Okay, again, if we look at, is it responsive? Yes, it is responsive, and it drops down, and it is exactly the one that I want. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm not going to use search. So I'm going to take search out, but I'm going to copy that for now. All right, and I am going to put this in here. And again, I'm just going to indent it so that I know that it's indented, and I'm just going to just take that, sorry, and indent it and say save. Now you can super indent some of them again, so that it makes your life a little bit easier. Look out for the U, indent the U, because that is actually, remember, it's an unordered list. I don't need the actual form, that's our search, so I'm going to take that out for now, and I'm going to save. So if we just talk about what this contains, so it starts with, let's call it the main element is nav. So right here at the bottom, you must close nav. Okay. All right. Then we have a div, which well, yeah, we have a few divs, but anyway, we have a div with our navbar collapse. Okay, and in there quite a few things, and then also in that we have a different div that has got a drop down. So again, we don't need that drop down. So what I am going to do is, in fact, I'm going to take out this whole li that is the drop down link, because I don't need that. So for now, I'm going to take that out. All right, so I only have a link that is my active home. Then I have a link that is called link, and I have one that is disabled. So again, I don't need this disabled. So I'm going to take all of that out, and I'm just going to have a normal link that is called disabled. Okay, remember, as I said, that if you want your A class to actually link to it or have an image in there, then you need to go and grab the actual image tag as well. So I'm just going to grab that because I know that mine is going to have an image there. So that is what that's going to look like. And of course, I can actually just take my source out for now. It doesn't go anywhere. And in fact, don't need style, so I'm just going to take that out. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. Okay, so let's see what this actually looks like now in the browser. So if I'm going to save it, what is it going to look like? So I'm just going to close that, open it. All right. Okay, so it sits kind of in the middle. Why? Why does it sit only in the middle? Why doesn't it sit from side to side? A bit of coffee on the side for me. The reason being is that we're putting it in a container called container. Now, container as an element in Bootstrap is 916 width. All right, it's not the full width. So if you wanted a full width, then you are going to have to put it in a container, which is called container fluid. And now, if we refresh, it goes from side to side. Okay, very important. The other important thing is if we go to styles, what I have done is I've taken some of the Mayor Web things and I have already placed it in here. Body comma, HTML comma, and all elements asterisk gets a margin 0, padding 0. You can also add a padding and margin to the classes of container fluid as well as row, and that will take some of the padding out that you normally have with Bootstrap inside of some browsers. Right, this is a browser quirk. Remember, some browsers treat classes different and they will add their own little element or their own styling to it. Another thing that I have added already is a troubleshoot class. The troubleshoot class here is called red border. So very important that you always have to add that troubleshoot class because that will allow you to find stuff if you're not 100% sure where they are. What I've also done for body is I've created the font size of 62.5%. Remember, that means that my font size now is 10 pixels. And that means that if I work with my EMs, they are actually just a lot easier to work with, meaning that one EM is actually 10. Okay, all right, so that's it for my CSS for now. All right, so that's the difference between a fluid and a normal container, is that I'm just getting one that goes from side to side. All right, so now if I go to my index, I can now actually go and change my name. And in this case, what's my tea brand for now? Lux Tea Company. So for now, I'm just going to put that in. I'm going to take it out later because I'm not gonna necessarily have anything in there. So this goes after the image. It is the image that is going to be the list. But since we don't have anything in there, I'll just go Lux. All right. And you'll see it there. But just remember, we're not going to have any type there. We are going to have a logo, but I just put it in there so that you see it now because we don't have a logo yet. All right, so let's just see if our toggler works. Yes, fantastic. There it is. So now we can change our actual links. So I'm not going to do home. I find home is a bit weird these days. So I'm just going to go about us. What's the next one? Our range. And then specials. Specials is also a bit naff, but anyway. And then I need another one. I'm going to copy one LI. Let me know it's a list item. UL or an OL means nothing if it doesn't have a list item in there. So then I'm going to have specials, and then I'm going to take out specials, but I'm going to have contact us. All right, save. And if we now update, then it should be there. Yes, grand, it is. It is working fantastically. Okay, all right. So the next is what I do want to do is I want to comment in here, and I just want to put in there, this is start of nav bar. Okay, and I'm going to copy that, and I am going to paste that, and this is, oh, strat, no, it's end. can't spell. Start. All right, and the reason why I'm using comments is so that we can find our stuff, you know, and it's just easier, especially if you start with coding, to actually find content. All right, so the next that I want to put in there is I want to put in a Jumbotron. Now, a Jumbotron is an element that you can actually use a lot. It's a very simple element. It has a background color. It has an H in there, all right, an H1 already, set with the Bootstrap styling called display 4. But obviously you can change that to your own H1 style. And then it has a lead, which is your second line of text. And then it has a P, which you can also change. But already in there is a button. So it's pre-formatted, really cool. And you can actually change that to your own liking. So I'm going to copy that. And then I am going to place it here. Again, I'm just going to comment. This is the start of Jumbotron. Gonna paste it, and this is, sorry, end of Jumbotron. Again, it's really important that you comment comment your code, because it'll help you. Okay, so there we have it. There we have Jumbotron. Now the big question is now, why is it from side to side? Well, it is from side to side because it lives in the, let's call it the mother container, which is a container fluid. If you wanted this to be smaller and sit in the middle, well, then you have to put it in its own container. If I now go and I say div container, I could just put a class, div container, then it is going to live in the center, and it's going to be, oopsie, what did I do now? There. It is going to be smaller, and it's going to just sit in the middle. So that's also why I say to you, you know, make sure that you understand when are things going to sit in the center of your actual website. Smaller in the center, and when is it actually going to sit on a fuller width? Right, because that's the difference between actually putting them in a container versus putting them in a container fluid. So if I take this out again, then it's going to sit from side to side. That's the difference between using container versus container fluid. All right, next I'm going to start using some cards because they are really, really powerful. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to start commenting. This is start of cards. And as I say, cards are super important elements. They're also part of the materialize style of working of Google. End of cards. All right. Okay, so if we go to our components inside of Bootstrap and we look for card or cards, there is a whole lot of cards. There are a lot of examples that you can use. I quite like to just use this simple one, which is an image at the top, then a title, then some then some information, and then a button. Because if I look at mine, normally that is how cards are designed. I just haven't used a proper or like a pull button, but I've used just an element or text that is going to be a button. So I like to use just a normal card, but there are so many, and it's nice for you to understand what all the elements mean. So if you could go through them, you can kind of practice what they mean. They always have a width in them as well, and they have an image area as well. And then they will have a some link areas in there, so there can actually be a UL in there as well. They are really beautifully beautifully coded little pieces that you can use. If you scroll down, you can also go and look at card groups and card stacks, and then also image overlays, which is also quite nice. And there is the horizontal one that we're going to use later, because this is obviously an horizontal card. And then we get card styles. And then, as I said, you can have some borders around them, and you can have card groups. Again, they've got some titles. They also have some muted copy. They can also have different areas in them. And then we have the grids that we can use, which we are going to play a little bit later. The MB is actually the spacing. I'm not going to go into that now, but MB is actually the spacing. But the way I like to lay them out is just adding my own rows and columns. Just remember, you're designing a website and it's actually built, if you think of Excel, it's actually very similar. All right, so I'm going to go to the top. I'm going to use my simplest card, not the kitchen sink. I'm going to use my simplest card, this one with an image, some text, and I'm just going to say copy. Now, the most important thing is that it has to live in its own container and it has to live in a row. So I'm going to start by saying this is a div with a class. I want it centered. So this is a div in the center area with a container. And I am going to close that div. Okay, now next I'm going to add a row. All right, I'm going to add a div because I need columns. So before I can add columns, I actually need a row. So I'm going to go div with a class of row. And just to see where this is, in fact, I am going to do that red border. So you have an idea of what I'm talking about. All right, okay. All right, so I'm going to do a row with a red border, again, so that you can see what I'm talking about. And then I am going to paste my card in. Okay, I'm going to take out the width because in fact I don't need the width now. And just so that you see what I'm talking about, I'm going to add my little image in there. So it's IMG and it's test card 1. And it's .png. All right, and there it is. So that's my biggest row. Yes, this thing is very big. I must actually make it smaller. It's massive. This is my my biggest row, and there's one card in it. Okay, only one card. All right. I actually want that card. I want 3 cards, by the way. So before I'm going to get, if I put 3 cards in there, I need to actually just double check where your card starts and ends. I need to put a row in it. So, a column in it. So I'm going to put a div with a class of column. Okay, just remember to close it properly so it is after the card. Yeah, it's a column that has a card inside. Okay. Now it's full width. So if I don't put any sizing inside of my card, if I put it in something that is a column by default is the total width in a row. All right, column by itself means 12 columns. All right, so if I only want this to be a third, then what is a third? A third means that I've got to go, remember, it's divided by 12. A third is it has to be col 4. Right, so if I now go, boom, there it is. Now I am not saying it's full width, so it's definitely not a col 12, but it is a col that is just a third, which means it's col 4. Okay, so I need 3 of the columns to make up 12. So that's super important. So again, just remember where you are. So I've got my div width is my card. So if we just super indent it, all right, there's my card, and there is my column. There's my card, there's my column. Also, the nice thing about Atom is if you are clicking on a specific element, you will see that it's underlined. So I am now talking about col 4, and both of these divs are underlined. Can you see that? So now I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it twice. So I want 3 cards. Boom, there they are. Okay, now I can change them because I have actually made 2 colors. So I'm going to change them to card 2 PNG and card 3 PNG. Boom, there they are. Okay, so this is the difference between choosing a normal col and now actually working with the 12 column structure of Bootstrap to actually give me 3 cards in a row. It's as easy as that. Okay, but now what if they are not the same? What if this one should be 3? All right, this one should be 3, and the last one should be what? It should be 6, because it has to always make up 12, guys. Boom, there I'm having it. Okay, also because it's much bigger, that's why my image is slightly bigger. Okay, I'm just going to Z that out because I wanted 3. All right, next thing is what I want to do is when it's in medium or in large, I want 4. But when it goes smaller to a smaller device, I actually want it to go underneath each other. So this is another wonderful thing. If you go to Bootstrap and you actually look at the grid, pay some attention to how the grid is actually laid out. And the different CSS options and column options for different size of devices. All right. So if you don't say anything, it can be column large, but you need to actually specify when is it column large and when is it column medium. So normally we will put in 3 there. So for instance, for large, it is 4. All right. And then we're going to do small, col-small, Anka. Col-small is now going to be what? 12. All right, or you can just say col 12, it's just the same. All right, so I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to paste it in there and say save. So if we now go and we double check, that's what we're going to see. So yes, for a large screen on 960, I'm going to have 3 columns. However, when I go to my smaller size, I now have stacked underneath each other. So that's the difference between using one set of design, all right, but actually thinking of, while you're designing, thinking of how it's going to look in a mobile device. And for that, we use the different column structures that Bootstrap has for us, and we will get something very, very quickly. All right, so this is the end of my cards. Again, go and play around it. We're not going to change anything drastically. This is just an introduction to how do we lay out things with Bootstrap. Next that I want to play with is I want to play something with, or just bring in a carousel. So in fact, the carousel I'm going to put in front of my Jumbotron. So I'm actually going to just go and say this is a start of carousel. What is a carousel? Well, a carousel is actually a slider. So the slider has by default already been coded for you. So you can just use that component with its JavaScript and amend it. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back into my Bootstrap. I'm going to go to components, and then I'm going to go to my carousel. And there are a few that you can use. I like to use the one obviously with as much control for my user as possible, which is the one with indicators, and obviously also some forward and backwards chevrons. So this is the slide carousel that I'm going to use. So I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to place it. Okay. Now again, by default, because I am just going to indent it, because I am working. If you save it, you're not necessarily going to see anything, but if I'm working with a container fluid, it's going to be side to side. So let me just put in some images so that you can see what it looks like. So it's just going to be image, and I made a test slide. I'm going to use test slide 1. It's also a PNG, and then I can copy this again and put it in my other image sources. Second PNG, and then the last one is third PNG. So what you can see, what you have in here is you have your controllers. All right, you control previous, you control next. They are actually below, and they are controlled with obviously with Z index. And you have your indicators, which is right to the top. Now, just remember that if you have more than 3 slides, then you can just go and add more. Go to 1, go to 2, go to 3, go to 4, go to 5. So Bootstrap is configured in that way, really cool. So if I go here back into mine, then you'll see it's from side to side. Okay, because it sits again in container fluid. If I wanted it to sit in that center area, like for instance in ours, this one is going to be it's going to be smaller, all right? Then I actually have to control it again with inside of that container fluid with a container. And I'm just going to say container. And end it off with container. Close the div. And boom. So that's the easiest part of actually controlling content with the simplest of simplest elements, container versus container fluid. And there you have it. We have a simple nav bar there at the top that is in fact responsive. So if I actually just drag it, then you'll see I have my little hamburger menu, and I have my Jumbotron there, and I have my cards. Very simple. Literally go and start by playing around. Understand Bootstrap first before you want to design something that is overly complicated. But then also once you understand it, then you can go into Photoshop and you know that how you're going to lay it out. This is going to be my nav bar. This section here is going to be a carousel. This is going to be horizontal cards. This is normal vertical cards. Could be anything. This is a section with an image there, etc. And then maybe a Jumbotron there. So again, if you understand the elements of Bootstrap, then you can actually design something that is fairly simple to build. right, so this is tutorial 1 of Bootstrap, and I hope to see you soon, and I hope that you enjoyed this very simple Bootstrap 101. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.